Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're zeroing in on something that, well, often gets pushed aside when we talk about active addiction, but it leaves this trail of wreckage that can be really profound.
Yeah, absolutely. Financial disaster.
Exactly. Financial disaster. It can seriously block the path to, lasting recovery.
It really can. When someone steps into sobriety, they aren't just dealing with stopping the substance use, right? They're facing the fallout. Years of chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And our sources are pretty clear. Active addiction leaves this deep, non-alcoholic trail of unmanageability.
Non-alcoholic wreckage, yeah.
Right. It shows up in painful relationships, unruly emotions, and maybe most intensely, this deep financial insecurity. Panic, really, over the bridges burned financially.
Okay, let's jump right into that, because for the person sitting there, maybe newly sober, facing the debts, the lost job, maybe legal bills, mishandled money, that immediate financial panic, it can feel just overwhelming.
Totally overwhelming. It can almost eclipse the relief of being sober.
Right. So the mission here for this deep dive is to kind of map out how the principles we find in recovery, honesty, responsibility, spiritual faith, the stuff embedded in the 12 steps, how they give a clear path, a structured way, actually, to clean up that financial past.
And the scale of it, like you said, it's huge. The sources really stress that the financial mess isn't just, collateral damage.
It's part of the cycle.
It's intimately interwoven with the addiction itself. The person is left just sick with worry about how on earth they'll untangle their economic life. And that anxiety, it's a constant trigger.
Which brings us to that core paradox you see all the time in early recovery. The person wants to fix it desperately. They want to pay the bills, make amends, apologize. They make resolution after resolution, often really frantically.
Yeah, full of determination.
But they fail. Again and again, they bounce checks, maybe borrow more money, hide new debts. Why? Why does it keep failing, even when the intention is good?
Because they're trying to do it alone, relying solely on what the sources call lone courage and unaided will.
Self-will.
Exactly. They're trying to solve what is fundamentally a spiritual and frankly, a neurological problem with sheer grit. And that's the exact same mechanism that failed them when they tried to stop drinking in the first place.
Okay, so let's start right there, at the beginning. Step 1, the failure of willpower. That's the first big realization you have to have, isn't it?
It is, and it's crucial to see it's not just about the substance. It's about admitting your life, your whole life, including the financial part, has become unmanageable.
Unmanageable, that's the key word.
And the source material is incredibly direct about how futile it is to rely on that self-will. It says willpower isn't some reliable faculty you can just turn on.
Like a tap.
Right. It says it's not a thing one can summon at will. And you see that classic cycle play out. Make a strong resolution, maybe to drink less, or in this context, spend less.
Yeah, I'm going to stick to the budget this month.
Exactly, only to crash soon after. And then you're filled with this awful, crushing shame, the internal mechanism for self-control. It's broken.
And that brokenness, that futility, it extends directly into money matters.
100%.
So if I, relying on my old way of thinking, the thinking driven by fear, by self-pity, if I try to manage a strict budget or stick to a debt plan, using that mechanism.
You're using the same tools that got you into the mess.
Yeah. The same scheming and insight, as the sources put it. It's kind of insane when you think about it.
It really is. And, when we talk about willpower failure, it's interesting to look at the neuroscience, which the sources, written decades ago, seem to grasp intuitively.
How so?
Well, research today confirms it. Decisions that seem freely made, like impulsively buying something expensive on credit, can actually come from deep within the limbic system, the emotional, fear-driven part of the brain.
Okay.
So when someone's overwhelmed by strong emotions or stress, like panic over bills piling up or getting a nasty letter from a collector, that fear response can just override rational thought.
So you act from that triggered state.
Exactly, seeking immediate emotional relief, which often means digging the hole deeper financially, making irrational choices.
So the idea of, I just need to try harder when you're in a financial crisis, it completely misses the point.
It totally ignores the underlying drivers. Trying harder is like, as you said, trying to use a wet match to light a fire. It's just not going to work.
Okay.
And that's why the shift in step 2 and step 3 is so absolutely pivotal, especially for finances.
The move away from self-reliance.
Right, away from the self-reliance that consistently produced disaster, towards dependence on a power greater than oneself. You stop trying to fix everything, including the debt, with sheer willpower.
And instead?
You try to bring your personal will into agreement with Well, a higher power's direction for you.
I like the analogy some people use GOD as good, orderly direction. It
Ye-
makes it intensely practical, doesn't it? Especially for someone financially shattered. It's not just some abstract belief.
No, it's structure, it's guidance. True strength, the sources argue, comes precisely from this dependence, not from pretending you can do it all yourself.
So that good, orderly direction, it could look like seeking out a mentor, someone financially sound.
Absolutely. Or working closely with a sponsor who gets the financial pitfalls. Or maybe just adhering strictly to a budget tool, a structure outside of yourself, anything external to that flawed, self-willed mechanism.
Because trying to force the wrong piece into the puzzle,
Relying on self-will, it just leads to exhaustion, frustration, and eventual financial relapse. That's what the sources say.
so the surrender in step 3 isn't just about stopping drinking or using.
Hmm.
It's profoundly about turning over all the tangled threads of life. And money is right there, front and center.
Absolutely. The inability of personal courage alone to solve that awful jam, the debts, the insecurity, it forces the issue. You have to turn the financial will over too.
To a higher principle or a higher power, basically saying, look, I can't fix this mess on my own. I need guidance. I need to align my daily money actions with something outside of me.
That's the core realization of step 3 in a financial context. If you don't surrender, you're left victimized by remorse and guilt about yesterday's debts and sick with worry about tomorrow's bills.
It's a trap.
It is.
Hmm.
But when we admit that our lone courage and unaided will cannot do it, that surrender opens the door. We realize we need to seek God's will or align with good, orderly direction instead of trying to make that power grant our selfish, often really irresponsible financial wishes.
That willingness to be guided.
It's the prerequisite, the absolute foundation for all the practical cleanup work that has to follow.
Okay, so once that huge decision is made, the decision to seek guidance, to surrender the program, moves right into this deep investigation. Step 4, the searching and fearless moral inventory. And our source material draws this incredibly direct line between character defects and financial chaos. It's not like the money problems are separate. They're often just the visible symptom.
The scar tissue, yeah. We really have to get this connection. The destructive financial behavior could be reckless spending, gambling, hiding assets, or even just ignoring the mail, that kind of irresponsible non-action.
Yeah, just pretending it's not happening.
Right. That's rarely the core problem. It's almost always a symptom of something deeper.
Yep.
A soul sickness, the sources call it. And they identify the primary root as fear.
Fear. Fear is the root of money problems. You see that everywhere. But how does the inventory actually force you to trace that specific financial mess back to the fear that caused it?
Well, it requires this really painstaking review. You have to go beyond just listing the actions. The sources lay out a pretty clear progression.
Okay.
It starts with unreasonable fear. Fear that our basic instincts, our need for security, maybe comfort or belonging, won't be met.
Fear of scarcity. Fear of not having enough.
Exactly. Fear of scarcity, fear of inadequacy, fear of being judged as poor. That fear pushes us towards financial defects. It makes us covet the possessions of others, or lust for power, which often plays out through money, or just grab for more of everything than we need.
So, compulsive shopping, maybe hiding money from a partner, making risky investments out of greed.
All of it. There are all these frantic attempts to fill that hole inside, the one created by fear.
Okay, so this means just listing my debts or the money I might have, borrowed and not repaid. That's not enough for the inventory.
Not nearly enough.
I have to dig into the motive. Why did I create that financial wreckage in the first place? What was I trying to buy emotionally with that spending spree or that gamble?
Precisely. And if we skip that deeper look, we risk what happened to the person named Natalie in the sources.
Tell us about Natalie.
Well, she was initially really focused on admitting her external wrongdoings, the things she did to other people, but she completely missed what was driving her.
She forgot what motivated her in the first place, it says.
Right. And she couldn't make real progress in cleaning up her character until she turned that flashlight inward, looked for the source of her fear, her jealousy, her anger. She'd initially just skimmed over the abandonment and incest in her past because she found it too painful to really include in her inventory.
Wow. Okay, that makes the financial application incredibly deep then. So if she were doing a financial inventory, she might list, okay, I maxed out 3 credit cards on 3 different vendors.
Right, the factual event.
but she'd missed the reason that maybe she did it as this unconscious, short-term grab for control or a temporary hit of happiness because underneath she felt worthless or was dealing with that trauma.
That's the single most crucial insight of step 4, I think. The inventory forces us to look past the action, to analyze the subtle, often sneaky ways we hide a bad motive under a seemingly good one.
Can you give a financial example of that? Hiding a bad motive.
Sure. Maybe you complain endlessly about your spouse's spending habits. You frame it as, I'm just being responsible, fiscal management.
Sounds reasonable on the surface.
Right. But the actual motive might be a deep-seated lust for power and control over the household money. Or, another one, you might constantly complain about being financially depressed. Not just stating a fact, but doing it to get sympathy and attention, using money worries as a manipulation tool.
Oof. That's uncomfortable honesty.
It is. And this kind of self-deception, it just permeates our financial dealings until the inventory shines a light on it.
So for someone really struggling, who's been actively destructive with money, what are the practical mechanics? What should they be listing beyond just the obvious debts?
The sources push for absolute thoroughness. A financial inventory needs to cover not just money owed the bills, but also money mishandled or stolen.
Like from an employer.
Employer funds, yeah. Hidden bank accounts, even small loans from friends you conveniently forgot. It should detail things like insurance claims you just ignored, taxes you didn't pay.
Opportunities lost.
Definitely. Opportunities squandered because of the addiction, promotions missed, jobs lost due to unreliability, things that directly harmed your earning potential. And you list everyone harmed financially, even if that person is yourself or your kids who depended on you. It's a total, unflinching accounting of the wreckage.
And then comes step 5, honest disclosure. After writing all that down, you admit the exact nature of your wrongs. To God, to yourself, and crucially, to another human being.
And this is often where the shame starts to lift.
Yeah.
It can be a truly transformative moment, sharing that inventory, maybe reading it aloud or summarizing it to a sponsor, a trusted friend. It acts like a mirror.
How so?
Because the listener ideally accepts you as you are, flaws and all, and that acceptance allows compassion to creep in. The burden of shame starts to lighten. Until we talk with complete candor about these conflicts, including the specific financial dishonesty, that burden stays trapped inside.
And blocks growth.
Blocks spiritual growth, absolutely. The release you get from this disclosure is vital for moving forward without shame driving you right back into financial irresponsibility.
Okay, so that clears the decks internally. Then we get to step 6 and 7. This is about a fundamental change in attitude, right? Being entirely ready to have these defects removed and then humbly asking for them to be removed.
The key word there, and the sources really hammer this home, is humbly. Humility is the cornerstone. Our crippling handicap, which absolutely included the inability to manage money maturely, was always rooted in a lack of humility, in self-will, believing we were the center of the universe.
So step 7 is basically a plea. Asking for those specific financial defects from step 4, the fear, the greed, the lust for power to be taken away.
Exactly. It's asking for help in changing those core drivers.
And I find this distinction really interesting, the idea that we're striving for spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection. How does that apply financially? Because money feels very black and white. Sometimes you either paid the bill or you didn't.
That's a really important line to walk. If we aim for financial perfection, like a flawless budget overnight, zero debt instantly, perfect investment choices.
Sounds good.
It sounds good, but it's essentially pride sneaking back in. We're setting an impossible standard. It guarantees failure, and then self-blame, self-flagellation.
Which can lead right back to the problematic behavior.
Absolutely. The sources warn us. The struggle is between striving for the objective, which is attainable, like measurable, honest financial stability, and striving for the impossible ideal of perfection. Pride, they say, is one of the most dangerous shortcomings for a sober person. It can show up as financial grandiosity, thinking you're suddenly Warren Buffett,
Or the opposite, crippling despair over past mistakes.
Exactly. Both extremes are rooted in pride and self-centeredness.
So how does the program make sure that progress, not perfection, doesn't just become an excuse? An excuse to delay paying debts or cleaning up the mess.
It's the action required in the next steps. That's the guardrail. Progress means the change in attitude comes first. Step 7 is that fundamental shift, moving out of self-centered fear towards relying on a higher power, aligning with spiritual principles. Once that internal block starts to shift, the willingness to take the necessary, often difficult action becomes possible. Things like living frugally to repay debt or facing the reality of bankruptcy if needed. Humility is key, not just for staying sober, but for being able to function rationally when financial challenges inevitably hit.
Right, so now we take all that internal work, the inventory, the willingness, the humility, and apply it outward. Steps 8 and 9. This is the direct repair work. Restitution.
Making things right.
Step 8 is making the list of everyone harmed, financially or otherwise, and becoming willing to make amends. It's about letting go of the guilt and regret by actually acknowledging the real-world consequences of our actions.
And the sources raise a really critical point here about motive. It's easy to miss, especially if you tend towards self-blame.
Okay.
You have to question why you're apologizing or making the amend. When you list the people you harmed financially, maybe lenders, family, businesses, are you genuinely trying to set things right because you were wrong? Or is it just fulfilling your apologetic tendencies, as the sources put it? Is it a way to seek validation or get sympathy from the person you wronged? Trying to make yourself feel better.
That's a subtle but massive difference. Needs real honesty. Because if you just go around apologizing for absolutely everything,
You risk diluting the power of this step. The focus has to be on pure motives, a genuine commitment to fixing the material relationships that need attention, and often those are the financial ones first.
okay, then comes step 9, the action, making direct amends wherever possible.
And the sources actually say this repair process kind of begins the moment you tell your family, I'm truly trying this program, and admit the damage your addiction, including the financial stuff, caused. That's the prep work.
But then there's the big caveat, the source of endless discussion, right? Except when to do so would injure them or others.
The crucial exception clause, yes.
This requires good judgment, especially with money. Can you give an example? When would making a financial amend actually cause more injury?
Okay, let's paint a picture. Say someone, while deep in addiction, stole a significant amount of money from their elderly mother.
Okay.
Now, maybe the mother has recovered financially since then, and maybe she's even forgotten the incident, or perhaps rationalized it away to protect herself emotionally. She's maybe a bit frail now, emotionally fragile, but financially okay.
Right.
The sober person, wanting their own peace of mind, feels this urge to confess the theft and pay it back immediately.
Seems like the honest thing to do.
On the surface. But the sources warn, confessing that painful, traumatic memory just so the sober person can buy their own peace of mind might actually injure the mother. It could throw her back into anxiety, fear, reliving the trauma.
So in that case,
The amend might need to be indirect. Maybe setting up a trust fund in her name without revealing the original source, or perhaps silently taking care of her in other ways. The goal is to prevent injury to the other person.
so it's not about my emotional relief primarily. It's about externally and practically setting things right, but always guided by compassion and prudence.
Exactly. And that lines up perfectly with the old Oxford group idea of restitution, righting wrongs to the absolute best of your present ability.
Making it right as much as you can now.
Yes. And this act of absolute honesty, when it's done sincerely, can be so startlingly different from how the world often operates financially.
Where dishonesty is almost expected sometimes.
Right. It can actually awaken the person who is wronged, make them see the possibility of a genuinely changed life in the person making the amend. The financial repair becomes a spiritual act.
This leads us to a really profound idea in the source material about money itself, the principle of financial stewardship. It sort of reframes the whole conversation.
It completely reframes it. It fundamentally changes how we think about wealth, debt, ownership, everything. The source suggests we're all just stewards to God for his property.
Stewards, managers, not owners.
Exactly. If we accept that premise, then the money isn't really ours to use recklessly or hide or hoard. We're managing it. The text is blunt. Using dishonest methods to get wealth won't lead to real, lasting happiness. It fundamentally disrespects this idea of stewardship.
So financial honesty bears lasting fruit, spiritually speaking, while dishonesty just creates a mirage, an illusion of security.
Precisely that, a mirage.
And stewardship means living with integrity, even when it's hard, even when it's painful. This idea of living amends, right? Enduring the consequences, even under financial pressure. Dr. Bob's story comes to mind.
Dr. Bob's example is just foundational here. His commitment to service and principle over immediate financial gain. It's incredible.
He was in dire straits financially, wasn't he?
Desperate. The sources mention him literally eating bread and milk for dinner sometimes, while other people who came into recovery after him were already finding financial success again.
But he didn't chase the money first.
No. He continued his service work, focused on helping others. He chose not to scramble for quick cash, just to clear his old debts faster. That shows this willingness to live with the financial consequences of the past, the debts, the poverty, while prioritizing spiritual repair and trusting the process.
Trusting that character building and service came first.
Exactly. He was willing to endure that financial hardship because his primary focus was recovery and helping others, not his bank balance. That is financial stewardship in action. It's profound.
Okay, so moving into the long haul. Financial sobriety isn't just a one-and-done cleanup with steps 8 and 9. It's a daily practice, isn't it? Step 10 comes in here.
Absolutely. Step 10 is the maintenance step, continuing to take personal inventory and critically promptly admitting when we're wrong.
So how does that daily inventory translate specifically to money? It's not just balancing the checkbook, I assume.
No, much deeper. Step 10 is that vital daily check-in. It keeps the integrity established earlier alive and kicking. It keeps you focused in the present. Financially, this constant self-analysis spots the subtle stuff. Like, okay, before I make this purchase, am I being honest with myself? Do I need this? Or am I justifying it with some good motive, like, oh, it's an investment, when the real motive is just impulse or trying to keep up appearances?
Or complaining about money.
Right. Am I complaining about an expense because it's genuinely unfair? Or am I maybe just fishing for sympathy? Using worry as a tool. This constant vigilance about our motives is key for maintaining integrity in all our dealings, big and small.
So the 10th step financial check-in is about checking the motive behind every money decision. The impulse buy, delaying a bill, criticizing someone else's spending.
Exactly that. And the sources warn, it's easy to slack off on the spiritual program when things start going well, when the debts are finally shrinking.
Complacency creeps in.
That's exactly when we risk becoming lazy, complacent, turning back towards self-centeredness, which was the root of the whole problem. A daily inventory is like a spiritual thermometer. Tells you exactly where you stand.
And spotting those flaws, admitting them, correcting them daily.
Promptly, without delay. That's the only way to regain and maintain spiritual balance, which in turn is what supports ongoing financial sanity.
Okay, so when we maintain that kind of integrity, that self-awareness, the sources suggest something pretty profound happens regarding long-term financial security. They talk about the spiritual law of prosperity.
Yeah, this is where the attitude shift really starts to bear fruit. It's the shift from a scarcity mindset, which is totally driven by that soul sickness, by fear, to one of abundance and trust.
How does that work?
Well, the idea is if you continually hold the thought of poverty, of lack, you tend to stay poor because that fear drives you towards reactive, often self-defeating financial choices. But if you continually hold the thought of prosperity, not in a greedy way, but living in the awareness of your connection to what the sources call the spirit of infinite plenty,
Okay.
you actually set forces in motion that bring abundance. Now, this isn't some superficial manifesting thing.
Right, not just wishful thinking.
No. It's about removing the internal fear-based blockages that stop you from taking honest, productive action. It allows you to participate fully in life without being crippled by greed or despair.
That sounds like it ties straight into step 12, practicing these principles in all our affairs. The whole attitude towards security changes, doesn't it?
It changes radically, especially material security. Before recovery, think about it. The self-centered person's relentless demand for emotional and financial security constantly throws them into chaos.
Also,
They're either trying to play God and dominate others financially, maybe controlling a partner's spending down to the penny,
or the opposite.
or being completely over-dependent on others for bailouts, for constant support. And when they met resistance, when someone didn't give them the money or let them control it, they got bitterly hurt and disappointed, which of course is a huge relapse trigger.
That sounds like the person who needs total control over the joint checking account, or the one who blames the bank, the boss, the economy, anyone but themselves when the debt collector calls. Zero responsibility.
That's the classic pattern of self-will running riot in finances. But recovery puts spiritual growth first. And when that's genuinely the priority, that crippling demand for external security, whether it's a giant bank account or control over people or guaranteed job for life, it starts to diminish.
You realize something deeper.
You realize that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. That core fear that drove all the earlier financial craziness, that soul sickness, it lessens. It's replaced by trust, contentment, rooted in that spiritual dependency. The sources say the fears diminish like a thermostat being turned down.
So instead of always chasing external security, more money, more stuff, the security becomes internal, rooted in humility, honesty, relying on that higher power.
Exactly. The joy of living becomes the focus. And emotional sobriety, which absolutely includes financial sanity, follows naturally as a direct result of practicing these principles day in, day out in all your economic life.
That's a profound shift.
It's realizing daily that character building and spiritual values have to come first, and that a life spent just chasing the dollar, disconnected from integrity, only leads to more fear and more disappointment in the end.
Wow. This has been, yeah, incredibly detailed and surprisingly philosophical, looking at how these recovery principles offers such a structured solution for money problems, for debt, which is one of life's biggest stressors for so many people.
It really is.
Financial sobriety, clearly, it's way more than just paying off some bills. It's a total spiritual overhaul of your economic life.
It's the complete integration, isn't it? Humility, honest self-appraisal, spiritual reliance, integrating all that into every part of your economic life. Moving away from that self-centered fear that caused the mess towards trust, freedom, and, well, responsible stewardship.
Okay, so let's leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on, building on what we've explored. The sources tell us that dishonest methods for getting wealth won't bring real happiness, and that maybe we're all just stewards of wealth-managing resources that ultimately belong to something greater than ourselves. So, here's the question for you. If you were to fully accept that spiritual principle of stewardship, the idea that the money and possessions in your life are resources you're temporarily managing, how would that fundamentally change the way you value, manage, save, spend, and even talk about your money starting today?